That's a hell of a way to start this one. Welcome back, beautiful humans, to another episode of Naked Sunday. I'm your host, Caleb Nelson. I have the lovely AzLynn Berry here today, the emotional architect, as she's coughing up her coffee or tea or whatever's going on.
Yeah, that's what's happening. I'm choking on it.
Hell, it's Naked Sunday. We're here. We're real. Hopefully, people can get a giggle if they're listening on a Sunday or whenever they're listening. Maybe they spit up their coffee too and they can feel like they're not alone. We're having some fun. But thank you for the second go around of coming back and joining me on the show today, hon.
Definitely. I'm glad to be here. How have you been?
I mean, I'm just living the dream. I've been look at you turning the thing on me already. I didn't even anticipate
I
that
know.
right there. You're like, I need
Morning.
some grace time. I've been I'm gonna share this. So by the time this airs, will probably be what, I don't know, February. We're sitting right after Thanksgiving. I've started a new gratitude practice, and it's been fun. So every morning I go for a walk. Often I go with a friend of mine, and I got the little park right behind me. But every morning, I don't know why it dawned upon me to do it this way, but I started just thinking of 5 people that I'm grateful for.
Oh, I love that.
And sometimes I'll just go through my phone and just swipe to the bottom and be like, who haven't I thought of in a while? And I
Yeah.
just sit there and I think about it, or sit there, I walk there and I think about them.
Yeah.
And by the time I get back to from my walk, I just send them a message. Hey, I was just thinking about you. How you been? And the joy and the peace of heart that I find
Mhm.
within myself doing this practice, it's what am I, probably 3 weeks into doing this now?
Mhm.
The snowball effect has been incredible. And the reasons why I think it works well for me, for one, I tend to struggle, or at least I've been historically poor at staying in touch with people. By the way, I did this with you and I sent you a message. So hence why we're back on here, and I realized, oh shit, we never set a scheduled time to re-record this thing.
Love it.
Um and I forgot how much just a simple message of, hey, how you doing, could mean the world to somebody. And I've had a couple conversations with people that are like, man, they're just, some are just like, man, I was just in a tough spot. I needed to hear that somebody gave a shit about me today. Other ones
Awesome.
are like, I'm doing awesome. I love hearing that too. And some people it's just a short, quick response, and it can be left at that. Um 5 people, I got a number thing with the number 5. I think I've told you that, but
Yeah.
it's enough for me to like hit that, and like I have to actually stop myself from keep on going on that, because it keeps me hungry to do it the next day. And it's been a
Yeah.
really just powerful practice. For me, it works. It's not going to be everybody's gratitude. Some people like to write, some people, but this for me is just thinking about how do I got a Rolodex of names that I've connected with over the past, God, I don't even know. And I've made powerful connections with people, but the small staying in touch stuff tends to be troublesome. But what I love to do is I like to think about why I love people. I mean, you already know how I'm going to go in a second with this show.
Yeah.
And it's been a fun way for me to do that. So did not anticipate starting this episode off this way, but I appreciate you asking, and it gave me an opportunity
No.
to share that with you.
No, that's amazing. You've kind of created an active form of the loving kindness
Mhm.
meditation and exercise where you literally kind of sink in and you feel love for um love for yourself, love for someone close to you, like family member, someone that you really love, someone that you don't really know, and then someone you dislike.
Yeah. I
And
think
then
that
you
interesting part there with the dislike is
yeah.
it's reframed how I look at everybody,
Yeah.
because it's sometimes, I mean, all
Yeah.
every relationship can go through a rough patch,
Yeah.
but going back to when it started is often what helps me reground it. Like, oh, like, not, there's goodness in everybody. At least
Right.
the effort for me to find that is, just it shifts the rest of my day into like, oh, there's good in this world and there's a lot of love
Yeah.
to go around. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that
Well,
observation, how you said that.
Yeah, well, and someone that you dislike is someone that's actually teaching you something. They're showing you something about yourself every single time if you really look at it, because they people can say whatever they want to you. Your reaction is your own perception of yourself being put towards you. So they're literally just teaching you something, usually a very uncomfortable truth, but there's something good always underneath that stuff.
Mhm.
Always. Like a negative emotion, a negative experience, and a trigger is something that's going to almost always teach you something about your value system and your value sets that you've ignored, like ignored, shut down, pushed away. So it's good. Finding that like love and gratitude for the things that are uncomfortable is like a very beautiful kind of form of radical acceptance. Really kind of pushes you into a place where you're like, shit, now we have a place to start.
Oof. Oof.
Are we diving too deep too early?
For one, there's no too deep on Naked Sunday.
We're
So
swimming.
we're swimming. We're just swimming in like this is basically shallow water still. We're good.
Let me just bring back my coffee and choke again.
Well, let's get into this then. Like, so
Okay.
you know how I like to start this, and part of one of my other exercises in doing this is also looking for the new reasons why I appreciate people
Okay.
without going too far into stuff before we were talking about grief cycles. And
Yes.
it alludes to what you just said about going deep. And one of the things I really appreciate about you and our friendship since I've known you is there's never been a hesitation to just go there. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if that's just me or not, but for me in my life, I've always felt arm's distance from a lot of things, probably my own
Hmm.
insecurities and acceptance of myself to say, this is actually what I like to talk about. But when I find people who are appreciate going there right away and like, let's just talk about the real stuff, about life, about how things impact us and how we are hoping to affect others in a positive way, I find great value in that because as far as I know, I only got one shot at this life, and I like sharing that time, that
Yeah.
sacred time I have with people who also want to move that needle forward with the time that they have as well. So thank you for just being that and sharing that effort with me, even in this moment right now.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Oh, yep. That is, I remember this is how you started. I love
Oh, you forgot already? Oh, hello. Oh,
it.
hello. I want to come back to the grief and the ego death and the values stuff. But I
Okay.
want to, of course, give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. AzLynn, my dear, you know yourself better than I. Please share with those. Who are you?
Oh, that question, man. I've been rehearsing this part in my head. I'm still like stumbling down the same path. I hate titles.
Hey, don't have to answer with a title. You don't.
Boy. But I like, yeah. Uh, who is Aslan? I am a wild witchy woman that exists in the woods. No, I live in
I like
California.
that too. I like that too.
I'm a typical stereotype who would have a Starbucks in my hand and yoga pants, which is coming in like 2 hours. So excited for that. Um, I can't.
That might
To.
be the most unique response to that question yet. That's
Oh gosh, I had to.
fucking choice. That was great. That was great.
I was recently very harshly judged at the airport while I was carrying a Starbucks in my yoga pants. But hell, I saw the most beautiful women on the way to my gate, and they were the nicest people I ever met, and they're all from LA. Who cares if they're wearing yoga pants? They were sweet.
I'm a fan of yoga pants. Hell, I'd
Right?
wear them.
It's good stuff. I'll send you a pair.
Super tight ones. I
Oh, yeah.
got some Lululemons around. I got plenty of them that my wife always just, she was the one who got me into the Lululemon. No, was she? I think I got her into Lululemon, and then she was like, "Oh my god, these yoga pants are nice." And then
They really are.
they
They
really
really
are.
are. And the yoga pants that like double as business wear, I'm really kind of weirdly into that. Like I want all of my clothing to feel like yoga pants, but
Well,
I do like getting dressed very nicely.
yeah. Well, there is what do they call it? Athleisure or something like that. I'm starting to get advertisements um for like like the stretch wear kind of suits and stuff like that. I
Yeah.
think it's getting real interesting, and I see the value in it. And there's been times where like I would just do that too. But there is a little something when you have that put together bit. You do show up a
Yeah.
little more seriously. And I don't know if that's a proper way of phrasing that sentence, but there is a certain thing about organizing yourself in one way that
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. The a little bit of restriction is always good, and a really nice suit or a really nice outfit always does that, especially for women, because everything we do is on our tippy toes because we put on those high heels. Kind of trying to assert our dominance in the best ways possible.
Work it. Work it.
Right?
Yeah, for as
Oh,
much as high heels damage the feet, and I mean, man,
and
they
the
do.
low back.
All the things, but man,
Yeah.
they work it. They do their thing, and I
Oh,
get it. I
they
get it.
really do.
Not that
You,
I'm rocking high heels, but that's
yeah, you go out and you look at these women, especially like out at the bar or like a really nice restaurant, and you see the women in those really high heels. You've got to remember that that woman is tough. She's probably drunk just so she can wear her shoes because it hurts. It's painful. She's very dedicated. Not somebody you mess with. um, okay, so that's a lot of
that was a fun
hi.
sidetrack.
So my name is AzLynn. I am an alignment and an embodiment coach. This is my professional kind of moniker. They're good titles, but it still doesn't really explain anything to anybody. But I like them and I keep using them. So basically what I do is I mix my practice is a mix of neuromuscular retraining, which is a clinical practice of injury rehabilitation, where I literally retrain your nervous system and program your nervous system with a subset of information so that it can realign and heal. And I've mixed that with spiritual healing and life coaching. And the practice that I do, the reason I call it alignment and embodiment coaching is because I help people break protection patterns and their relationship with fear by deconstructing pathways to pain. And I help reprogram their subconscious response to their environment. I've been practicing.
So basically, they can feel better in their body and move about their life more holistically and more just better them, a better version of them, inside and out.
It's trying to explain what I do is still difficult. Like the clients that actually come for the physical work, they're the ones that take the most work to kind of explain what this is. So a person's protection pattern. Sorry, give me 1 second.
Sure.
Hi, puppy.
Oh, do we have a pup? We have a pup on the podcast?
Yes, I do. She's laying next to me and licking her foot.
Very cute.
So all I hear is licking in the background.
You might hear my dog snoring in a minute or two, so don't you worry. We're dog friendly here.
She is about to pop up any second now. Okay, so where was I? What was I talking about?
People who show up just for the physical tend to take longer. That's what you were saying.
Oh, yes. Yeah, because we kind of go back and forth because there's an aspect of what I do where I read a person's posture, tension, patterns, and their pain to help explain the emotional environments that they exist and interact with on a daily basis. So they come to me and they're like, I hear that you can fix really unusual things really quickly. And it's like, are you ready? Are you ready? Tell me about your pain, because I'm about to tell you some stuff about your behavior and who you are as a person that you may not be ready for. So this is the road we're going to go down, and it's not going to make any sense, but your physical pain that you're experiencing is a direct reflection of how your body has learned to protect an injury, and now it thinks crooked is straight, and I'm going to put you back straight, as well as having you emotionally re-embody what you've been avoiding. Are you ready? We're gonna
Are you
do
ready?
this.
I think that so many people struggle with grappling. That was a redundant statement. I think a ton of people grapple with that, we'll call it metaphysical paradigm of
Yeah.
my emotions had an effect on my physical pain. Like, nah. And because
Oh.
most of what Western medicine or Western culture is just like, scalpel this and just like pop, 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 and medicine and shot and whatever the thing
Yeah.
is, it's 1 + 1 = 2, right? But
Mhm.
they might not realize that there's 3 parts to this equation.
Yeah.
And that's for people that I see, and I'm sure it's what you're seeing as well. They're in this hustle and bustle, very, we'll call it material driven,
Yeah.
external validation driven world. Anything that is not necessarily something that they can just put their thumb on and be like, oh, I feel that right now. It's very hard because the work, deep work, is also very subtle many times.
Yeah.
And it's something you have to feel. And go figure,
Mhm.
people who are rushing through their life probably haven't stopped to feel anything and observe their feelings in probably quite some time. Hence why they're in so much physical pain.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in general, just in general, like we're taught from a very, very young age to suppress and repress our emotions. Like 100%, just in school with the practice of teacher, may I please go to the bathroom? No, I can't. Okay, I've got to wait. Like these are things that like even people in Europe, they don't get it. They're like, what in the you have to wait for a break. You're going to go work at a cubicle and then you have to wait for a break to pee. You get 15 minutes and you have to, it's just weird. Like there are so many different aspects where we've literally just taught ourselves to repress our own basic needs,
Mm.
and they're culturally accepted and then they're pushed even further into the drive of what you were talking about, where we're looking for external validation of who we are in places that what make us a good workhorse. Like life isn't based on how good of a worker you are. Like those really aren't real accomplishments. It's the like moral character, the value of who you are and how you show up every single day and the effect that you have on people around you that actually make a good life.
Mm. Well, what is meaningful to me about that is that the irony of what you're saying, and when you show up in alignment with your values and your character and truly as yourself, the, we'll call it the prototypical narrative around what a good worker is, of you're consistent, you showed up on time, and whatever that
Yeah.
means,
Yeah.
it tends to fall into place naturally. And it's not a push, it's very much
Mm-mm.
a pull, because they're feeling called.
Yeah.
And if anything, half the time I have to, whenever I see that, I'm sure you see the same, as like, hey, slow down a little bit. Like you actually we need to channel this, because you're like, learn how to pace, which is a very
Yeah.
different side. And I'm not saying just stop people altogether. It's saying, hey, learn how to channel this in a way that you can also sustain the progress you're making.
Yeah.
What a very different way of looking at it. And as you said, like, I think people don't even think about the subtleties of like, oh, I got to raise my hand to go to the bathroom. Are you not autonomous over, if you actually have to go to the bathroom or not, versus your teacher? Like,
Oh, yeah. Well, and the
I,
urgency too. Like, do you really have to like express to the teacher that you're about to have an accident and the whole class? Like, this is rude.
like, gets into a weird like shame guilt cycle around that, and there's a whole
Yeah.
bit.
So
There's a whole
many,
bit.
there's so much.
Mm-hmm.
There's so much shame and guilt just around having bodies.
Mm.
Stupid.
Well, I think that leads us back into what we were talking about a little bit earlier about grief cycles, because I have to imagine what you're watching as somebody's going through these physical transformations, and in real time also navigating the emotional journey
Yeah.
that basically spoke that pain into existence. I mean, I think a lot of people don't even understand what the closing stages of that look like. So how do people even know where they are on that roadmap? Maybe can you dive in a little bit some of that?
When I'm working with people, this is the aspect that is probably the easiest,
Hmm.
but it's also the point that hits the most resistance because people just don't understand it. But when I'm working with people, I break these kinds of cycles into very specific small exercises, things that are done just for a couple of minutes a few times a day. Like I call it emotional seating. So I will take a specific thing that someone is working with, and I will have them say every time they see themselves in a reflection, they have to speak to themselves in a very specific way. Like that's a simple one. That one will come up like many, many, many times throughout the day.
Could you give me an
But
example of like somebody walking through that exercise?
all right. So let's say we have someone who's a mental processor. They
Mhm.
think all the time. They are disconnected from their body. They don't really do a lot of exercise, but they have their inner critic goes off all the time, right? Like I know that I'm having a bad day or a bad cycle when my inner critic is the one that wakes me up and puts me to sleep. Because
Mm.
that's when I want to drink. That's when I want to like watch TV. That's when I want to spend all my time in my phone, which makes it worse because now we're met with like all of these other weird forms of self judgment. So I'm specifically like, this is specifically for people who spend too much time in their head and have kind of a disassociation with themselves. Like there's something there that they're avoiding.
Mhm.
Um, so that specific person, I would be usually like, this is really common with women because we'll take care of other people and we won't take care of ourselves. So there's almost like an apology phase that kind of has to come where we learn to speak to ourselves and react to ourselves differently. This particular exercise, I like to have people speak to themselves as if they are their best friend.
Mm.
But like, let's separate that. I want you to like almost pretend like you are looking at your best friend or you are in the body of your best friend looking at you. But I want you to emotionally connect with how intensely you are connected. I don't know how to say this. I usually walk people through like a meditation to help them create this emotional connection
Okay.
first. And then when they look in the mirror or see their reflection, they kind of have that automatic response as if they were seeing their best friend. And when I say this, I literally see my friend Kristen.
Yeah.
Because she's the person that I think of from when like I was a teenager that I had all the bad ideas with. And it was like, yeah, that's a great idea. I'll drive. And it's a way to kind of shift that inner critic from a position of that negative bias that we all function off of, which is basically the brain looking for ways to protect itself, right? So we've got to shut that mechanism down. So this is a small exercise where you literally look in the mirror and you're like, hey girl, what's up? Like simple, like simple. It's really simple if you're willing to do it. It's really, really, really simple. But it takes that thing, that mental narrative, and turns it into a new agreement where now it's willing to help you, support you, and is functioning for you. So
Mm.
I really work with the subconscious programming within your environment.
Mm.
And this would also be someone who would shy away from themselves. So they probably have some like neck, shoulder pain very consistently. So even when they like see themselves or they meet other people, they kind of like shy away and their
Soft.
body, yeah, their
Mm.
body will hold pain and start like really kind of throwing that up,
Mm.
especially on the left side, like bringing your left shoulder up to kind of shy away and kind of you're referencing the past. Your model from the past is broken from the inner critic speaking way too much.
Some people would be like, that's way too obsessive. It's like, but once you actually put all the pieces together, what I really like about that exercise is simply you're getting out of your head for a second.
Oh
And
yeah.
especially from a lens of you're putting yourself into the shoes of somebody who loves you and is then observing you. What would somebody who truly loves you say to you? Man,
Well,
that
and
hits different.
Like we spend all of our time in the opposite position thinking about how we would take care of others and how we want to be treated. So yeah, it needs to get flipped. You need to be able to see that, kind of make peace with that aspect and understand that you deserve it as well. Even
Well,
though like mentally you're like, of course I deserve it. That's insane.
well, that's
That way.
leveraging a really like you're leveraging a skill set they've already developed. They know how to be a caregiver.
Right.
Just hack it in a way where they can turn that back on themselves. But until you get outside of yourself,
Yeah.
it doesn't hit. Wow. I really
The
like that.
the thing with it though is there's going to be that initial avoidance. So a lot of times, like I will walk them through kind of this meditation while I am working on the areas of the body that are kind of speaking up, the areas where they have painful emotional triggers. And I will work them through kind of making this different connection while also speaking to the body and dealing with the nervous system itself. So the body will also pick up this trigger, because once I hit, we'll call it, it is called a cluster spasm, right? You have a lot of nervous tissue that travels through certain areas and they all get pinched, especially in the neck. So I trigger that specific area, and then walking them through the meditation, creating a different emotional connection. Each time they do this exercise, now they're actually triggering their body to set off that subset of programming that I've been putting in to help break down the protection pattern. So now when they speak kindly to themselves, their shoulders are going to relax even more than it would have before, because now the body's like, that's the thing. And it sets off the programming. So they'll have a deep physical response in connection with the emotional highlight.
What it sounded like to me is you're, by bringing a more loving tone or loving energy to it, you're reassociating what's going on there. And because instead, when these things come up, it's met with more love than it is hate or resistance or anger or energy, that kind of negative energy. It also gives the body permission to relax because it doesn't have anything to fight against anymore. Does that sound kind of like ballparkish?
I put people in the safest position possible, and then I elevate and spike their pain and show them that it's temporary. And the body goes, oh yeah, I don't have to hold on to that. I don't have to prepare to feel like shit because it's just passing. It's on its way out.
Well, that's a perfect metaphor for everything we were talking about with grief. Letting go.
Yeah.
Physically letting go. And maybe easy, I'm not curious. Maybe easy wasn't necessarily the best word of like, it's the easiest part. Letting go is the resistance. It's weird.
Hard. Yeah. Letting go, you have to get, if you're dealing with grief, you have to get really angry before you can let go. Because you're actually taking your ego, who has a job. The job of the ego is to like keep you emotionally elevated, to like prove that you have worth, right? That's why the ego freaks out, because it thinks it's not valued. We don't value ourselves. So it has a job. And the anger aspect is so necessary, because that's the aspect where you're reconnecting with your worth once it's been challenged. And you're going through the phase of being like, no, I shouldn't be treated like that. I shouldn't treat myself like that. I shouldn't, whatever it was that I went through, like, I'm mad. Like, I'm mad that happened. And that weirdly enough is the aspect that allows you to let go, because it's either going to motivate you into making the change that you were incapable of making before, or it's going to allow you to kind of go, yeah, that happened and I'm done. Like all that energy that I've been using and wasting, I can put somewhere else now. Grief is an interesting creature. It's not like a single phase. It's where you like bargain and argue, and you can't accept reality. You can't accept the truth of what you're experiencing. You go through really deep sadness and depression, and you get really angry. And then somewhere on the other side of that anger, you actually hit acceptance and you begin to find peace. But it's a process. You have to go through that entire process, whether you're grieving a loved one that has passed and you're stepping into that place of like, I'm going to celebrate and love you, but also learn to live my life without you, and you step into that place of where I'm going to live life for you with an exclamation point, like you are with me. So I'm going to do this for us both. Or if you're grieving, like with COVID, like what your life was before and what your life has become and where you're headed and what life actually looks like when you've gone through that ego death, right? We had our worth kind of dismantled and devalued, and all of these like social constructs of be a good worker, but go die for us. Like all of that stuff has happened to so many people, and it's just moving. There's so many different like aspects of this grieving process that we've been going through socially, just in general, that yeah, I'm getting way off. I'm about to go down a dark tunnel.
No, I'm here with you. And there's a few things, especially I think there's some other extra things that you brought up there, and I think it's worth bringing to the forefront. Grief cycles for different things.
Yeah.
But the fact that those things can overlap at the same time can get very confusing. Like if you're still grieving a loved one, and maybe you're still grieving an old relationship, and maybe you're still grieving a job change, and you're still grieving a and you have these different avenues of your life that there's a lot of, it's very difficult to separate those and look at them individually. And
but you don't.
Or you don't, or I mean, that's a choice too. People don't have to. But I think that especially the past few years where it seems that, we'll call it combativeness on a global scale, seems to be it's easily observed right now.
Yeah.
We think it's been the most, but there's also equally as much love, which I think people have avoided observing that part because it like takes work to do that. But there's
based on the negativity bias.
Yeah, well, I mean, social media is channeled, it's funneled, as they say in news, like if it bleeds, it leads. Yep. That's a very quick thing to get you to react. So you're staying dialed into whatever platform you're in at that moment, and whatever they're trying to sell you with that fear. But the separation of those things, I think that becomes especially important with the society right now, is that conflating all of the things at once makes it very easy to become vulnerable to hair trigger things, anything, because you can't take a step back and separate, wait, that was this person here, that doesn't mean they were this here, that's this group, like that thing might be upsetting, but like I still have my life here. That's hard to do that, and to take full ownership of also your own behaviors and your own stuff you're going through and your own name your thing. Man, that is not easy. So I think that's where people also think like, oh, well, it's going to take this many months and it's going to be like that, and then I'm going to be over it, and like I can let go. It is as simple as just let go. But if people haven't practiced what you're talking about, bringing, I gotta imagine the shoulder was associated with something in somebody's life. Okay, well, what's that one thing? We got to make sure you're safe in all the other things, so we can talk to just that one thing and reprogram or communicate, reassociate the message that's going on there, and let that go. And that might be for a little bit.
I feel like when it's that intense, when I'm dealing with people who are deeply depressed on multiple levels, that are grieving on multiple levels, which there's a lot of us are. It's not a few people. A lot of us are going through this phase and have transited through exactly what you were talking about. That is when your full personal identity on how you interact with all of these different areas of your life has completely crumbled. To me, that's the place where, like, it's kind of messed up, but this is where, like, being able to, oh God, how do I say this? How do I say this? It's beautiful. It's really messed up. It's like hitting your bottom. The only place you have is to go up. because everything looks so dark that the smallest amount of light illuminates everything. Those are the moments where like life becomes intoxicating. Like you've been buried for so long that the tiniest amount literally feels like you're on ecstasy. The tiniest amount of lifting. And when I'm dealing with people, it's one of the things that I try to like explain to people, like what you're going through right now is 1,000 times harder than what I'm going to put you through. You're going to be with me for a month to 3 months maximum. My most difficult clients lasted 3 months before they were like, I'm good. I'm gonna go have fun. I'm like, okay, that's my job is done. Like, you don't need me. You're running away. You're having a blast. We are so good. But yeah, I don't know. That's one of the areas, one of the places where it like real, I don't want to say magic, but it's intoxicating. Like people can become very intoxicated with life again if that's their starting point. And being able to watch that transition is wild. Some people want to stick with the resistance and avoid and think that external validation, like going and having sex and short-term relationships and like kind of masking their ego with other people is going to lift them up. That does happen, but you'll continue to kind of like trip and roll through this like cycle. If what makes you feel good is like momentarily making a little bit of money and having sex with a stranger, those are things that are not found in yourself. Like again, your triggers are teaching you something about your values, your purpose, and who you are. Your triggers are literally communicating the base of who you are that you have either repressed or pushed down. So that hair trigger is literally that area where you can connect with yourself if you choose.
I love that.
There is, I know it sounds crazy, but it's like it's at that weird point where life can become intoxicating if you're willing to meet that resistance and step forward towards something that you don't know, that you've never tried before. Do I sound,
No, it makes perfect sense.
I'm trying so hard to communicate what I see and
No,
what
no,
it
you're good.
feels like
You're good.
to move through this process.
No, that was said pretty simply. I think there's one caveat out here that we should tell other people. Hey, by the way, don't rush to go hit rock bottom. You can also just decide that today was rock bottom, and that was like, oh, I had a tummy ache. Maybe it's time for me to start changing my life. Like, okay, like that could be it. I think a lot of people then there's this what's the word? I'm borrowing this from somebody else who shared this. They're like, people dig themselves a hole to climb out of, but then they continue to go dig themselves a hole to climb out of because they feel excitement from climbing out of the hole, as opposed to don't dig yourself a hole in the first place, start building from solid ground. Like that's also, if not, I may change that. That is exciting. And I think one of the sad parts, and perhaps that's what we all need to go through in some way, shape, or form, our own version of the hero's journey. But societally, what have we glorified? I dug myself into a hole and then I had to go on the hero's journey to do it over and over and over again. Considering we have this beautiful thing called life and a body and a gift that is, maybe if we just learned how to respect that from the get, we could go a lot farther, much faster if we decided not to dig yourself a fucking hole. But what I really what, go ahead.
I have a tendency to tell people that how do I put this? I'm not necessarily a wise person. I don't do very good at learning from other people. I can watch people fail and I will still make the same mistake because I like to learn from life and I like to know what it actually feels like. I'm not the wisest person. Speaking about holes and digging and falling into them. I mean, just as people in general, we have a tendency to have addictive behaviors, if this is something that's common for you, you're also going to have emotionally addictive cycles. We all do. We all have emotionally addictive cycles, and digging yourself a hole so that you can feel picked up. Like, oh, I don't, I'm getting a little uncomfortable. We actually found something that makes me uncomfortable.
That's okay. We're here on Naked Sunday. We're getting vulnerable. Let's do it.
I can't, nope.
I'll step in for a minute then. While you breathe, breathe. The I think there's something around this glorification of that darkness.
Mhm.
I think that's interesting. I think as we talk about these structures, we have so many people that are like pushing against. I mean, I can assuredly say I've had my very deep struggles, that, to put it lightly, with, we'll call it, authority and authority figures.
Yeah.
But much the same as letting go is part of the grief cycle, I think there's the other side of growth is surrendering to something bigger than yourself, as opposed to, I need to control the narrative, and I need to control my identity, and I need to control the label, and I need to control what it means to be good with my certifications and my name all the shit. As opposed to, why can't we, like, I think it'd be beautiful if it's this weird thing, like there's a kid who grows up with a great life, loving family, all that, like there's this weird, like, you should feel guilty or shame for having had a good life, and you had that privilege, and like, maybe you just continue to model what you learned. You don't need to go destroy that, everything that your family did for you because they cared. There's that whole saying of
Yeah.
shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in 3 generations. And the more I continue to observe these things, it's like, why do we want that? If we really say, if everybody says, how I want world peace, and I really want everybody to live happily and get along together, well, why are we wrapping guilt and shame around just being good? It doesn't mean you're lesser than. It doesn't mean you're not special because you're not the best at something. You just had a good life. You've had a good life. You had a loving family, and we're all going to go through some struggles. We are all going to confront the death of loved ones. We're all going to confront some struggles in our work life, and we're going to probably struggle with some of our own health things. No matter how much we take care of it, there will be pain.
Yeah.
Why are we trying to add more unnecessary suffering to something that's quite beautiful and quite a privilege just to have in the first place? Life.
Yeah.
I know that really stuck out to me there.
I will never defend a concept over a person, ever. I want to understand and know the person and what they're trying to explain through the concept, versus saying protecting this concept is more important than the value of the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I have a girlfriend that does this. She gets, when she can't like necessarily win an argument, but she wants to maintain control, she defends a concept over the value of the person in front of her. And she'll champion something to the extent that the person and the value of the person no longer exists. That is something I won't do that. I want to understand, because if you want to, in order to be able to connect and help, like, I try to look at people as if I'm speaking to a child sometimes. And you can tell me a very disturbing, dark, deep concept, and I am going to try and understand you, but also give you my perspective, because I know that's the only way you're going to take information, be able to integrate it, and decide if there's a different perspective that might actually help you. Otherwise, we're just creating walls. We're just building walls. Yeah, that's one of those weird things. I'm really can't handle watching people break each other down. I want to understand you.
Well, how else can we grow if we're not curious?
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus, like,
Yeah.
people don't think about the long-term ramifications of that. And in many ways, that behavior is
Mhm.
often completely counter to what they had experienced in their own life, and they said they never wanted to do that. And the ideology that they're espousing or they're preaching at somebody is literally doing the thing that they accused somebody else of doing to them. It's a very hypocritical circle of life, if you will.
Yeah.
Circle of hate's probably a better way to describe that. But
Yeah, there's a lot of concepts that people hang this behavior on. There's a
oh
lot.
yeah, there's in nutrition, there's in religion, there's in politics, there's in fucking everything.
Yeah.
Um, One thing I want to come back to, and I love what you said
Mhm.
about values, is that when you
Mhm.
feel this pain, it's actually rubbing up against your internal values and self-worth. And I
Yeah.
love that. I don't know if I've shared this with you, but my core values exercise that when I work with clients and teach them, we'll call it with leadership,
Yeah.
I call it the anti-value method, because most people, ever done a values exercise, a core value
I
practice?
I don't know. Please
Well, what
enlighten.
most I've done a core values, like, find your core values, because every company says that's what you're supposed to do. I'm like, I get it. Um, the prototypical one, in some way, shape, or form, I've had it with a deck of cards, I've had it in a sheet of paper. Usually get a list of roughly, we'll call it 100 words, values.
Okay.
And your job is to cut it in half, remove half that don't fit, cut that next list that remains in half, and you basically whittle it down till the 5 seems to be the common number that people come down to. Again, I have a thing with the number 5. I like people to do it for number 5
Yeah.
because it also associates well with a layered concept that I bring into it of you're the average of 5 people you spend the most time with. Not my quote, but I believe in it.
Okay.
What typically happens with that practice, what I've observed, and I've had people tell me, is you don't actually choose what you truly care about. You choose words that you think your friends will approve of, as much as you try to say it's about you, because you have too many options. That's probably the biggest part of it. So what you ground yourself in is what you think people care about.
Yeah.
And while you'll feel good for a moment, typically after a week or so, it doesn't feel like it really attaches to anything.
Right.
It's not visceral. It doesn't like sit all the way in there. So what you're bringing up is really intelligent, because why not you leverage our body's own fight or flight reflex? We know how to pick up on something that's negative really fast. If I say,
Yeah.
what's something that really pisses you off right now? I'm sure you could think of one thing just like that. No questions asked, right to the point. It's very clear. So I'll give you my example. The first thing I thought of was like shitty table manners and poor, like, people just not having proper etiquette. It all boiled down to, I hate when people are disrespectful. If somebody doesn't open the door or say please and thank you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay, so the anti-value was disrespect. What does that mean my core value is? The exact opposite, respect. The hard part here is, now that you've proclaimed this is truly my core value, now you have to see how you're applying that in your entire life. And you quickly find, oh my God, I'm not living up to that standard in many areas. No wonder I feel like a hypocrite. No wonder I don't feel truly aligned. It sticks out like a sore thumb, and it makes it very obvious. Like,
Yeah.
it takes all your because the easiest thing to do is go point at somebody else, like, oh, you're being an asshole, or you're not, like, compared to what? Like, based off of what standard are you talking about? And usually, as you talked about, like, if we're pointing the finger of blame, it's really reflecting
Yeah.
something back on, like, this is how we feel about ourselves. Well, here's
Yeah.
the answer. That what you brought up earlier, tying it full circle into our conversation so far, is that's a great way to start to look at the people that maybe you call them your enemy or somebody you don't like, is that they taught you that core value, that thing, was really important to you. And if
Yeah.
nothing else, somebody like, oh, well, yeah, but I could learn it with somebody else. Like, well, you didn't. It happened to be that person. So be grateful for them for that one
Yeah.
reason, because they taught you that lesson for whatever reason they stuck out. They were the one that were the linchpin in that. And from somebody who's gone through this exercise deeply, my
Yeah.
wife and got my wife on board. When people truly figure out their core values, the speed by which you make new decisions is so fast, because you'll
Yeah.
hear it in people's language, and you have to watch like one or two behaviors afterwards with very simple things, because it integrates at a very subtle level.
Yeah.
As you've talked about, like pain it kind of just shows up in how you're interfacing with life.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong, you still have to do some checks and balances with other stuff, but some of the nuance in the beginning of making decisions, especially most people who listen to this are business owners, when you're making new deals or you're taking on a client, I mean, this is a big one. How you're taking on your clients. People think like, oh, there's like, it's money. Nope. You bring bad energy into especially a coaching business. Oh, that's an energy suck, an energy vampire. If you're working with somebody's body and you're sharing, like, if there's somebody who doesn't actually want to change, or they don't respect boundaries or values or whatever, I think I
Yeah.
told you, for the record, this is how I decide. I think I told you, and this is what happens with all my clients. Before I make an offer to somebody,
Yeah.
the last thing I think about is, this is somebody what I put in my phone, because every one of my private clients gets my phone number. And the last one is like, just people respect time. Oh, okay. Like, easy.
Yeah.
Because now if somebody's going to call me and it's a Friday night, which I've had before, it's going to be an emergency. It's not because like, oh my God, I stubbed my toe and I need to cry about it. It's like, anyway, Caleb Nelson's soapbox rant over for the time being. I wanted to share that with you because it aligned, and I loved how you brought it up. I love actually like how you quoted it. I'm going to definitely use that in the teaser. Leveraging, I think it also, the nice part about what you're talking about there is pain is no longer a bad thing. It's just
Yeah.
it's a signal.
Yeah.
What's the signal saying becomes the curiosity.
The amount of time it takes to dig all of it out is the hard part. Yeah, that's the hard part. But yeah, it definitely.
Well, but that's why you ask a great question. Are you ready?
Yeah.
If they're not ready, it's going to take really again long. But
Well,
if they
and
are ready,
I want to work with people that like understand there is an aspect of what I do that's very simple. It's very, very simple, but it's just going to require that you try. And it's funny because it's the easiest aspects. It's the easiest thing that I'm going to ask you to do, or the biggest things that people are like, oh, it's not really. No, like and I'm thinking to myself, are you paying me this much money to like write your own program? Because it'd be great. Just you can pay me and I'll just smile at you. I tell clients all the time, like, if you just want me to like take your money, I'm fine with that, but I'd prefer not to.
much prefer to actually have you change your life and feel better and not carry on all
Yeah.
this extra bullshit baggage that you don't need to carry. It's your choice to hold on to it.
Yeah. Just try. Just try. If that doesn't sit right, then we'll like figure out how to tweak it and integrate into something that's going to work for you. But try. Like, it's very simple, because a lot of the stuff that I do is the subconscious reprogramming that I've already started while I'm doing the body work or the physical work. If we're doing that aspect, because what I do, there's two different sides. I have just pure coaching, spiritual counseling, and then I have the full thing where we're doing the emotional body work as well. So, yeah.
What drew you to this work?
I've been doing this my entire life. That's hard for me to admit. I'm going to start stuttering now. Yeah.
Give me the simple stuff.
Is there such a thing in my world?
If you make it.
I've been doing this stuff my entire life. Even as a massage therapist, what I found with my clients, and I did this through my entire career, is when I was working with them, I was giving them postural exercises to adjust how they emotionally interacted with the world. And the people that did that are the people that healed. And I've specialized and worked with people with long-term chronic pain. Yeah, this is where my story gets kind of wild. We've discussed this before. You know this aspect of me. but the easiest way to say this is that when I was a child, I was Pavlov's dog. For those of you who don't know who Pavlov's dog is, Pavlov was a psychologist that trained his dog to have a biophysical reaction to a sound, to their environment. So when I was a little kid, I was in a position, an unfortunate position, where I developed PTSD at a very young age. Well, hypervigilance, then PTSD, and then an autoimmune disease. And I spent my entire life kind of digging myself out of not unfortunate situations, but changing my biophysical reaction to my environment. And now, as an adult, without even being aware of it, I gravitated towards opportunities to help people out of the same kind of situations and positions that I was in, which is what kind of like diving deep and going dark and having that nickname Mama Ayahuasca kind of came from this aspect of my personality. Like, if you show me who you are and you show me the things that you struggle with, I feel safe and I will help you feel safe.
Not everybody's willing to hold that space. So that's awesome that there's people out there like you, especially when people feel insecure in their body, and pain.
Yeah.
Physical pain is an insecurity. Whether we want to, most people think like weight loss, something like that, or shame around that, but like also feeling like, shit, I can't walk a couple steps and I'm worried that I'm going to fall, or whatever that is. Kind of two ends of the spectrum. And it's scary to let your walls down and say, hey, I'm going to trust you. So
I actually had one of those clients
that they said like, hey, I was scared, and then I was willing to just say, hey, I gotta trust you like this.
Couldn't walk, had a fall. We later found out that she had essentially developed vertigo from a mixture of diet and supplements absorbing her iron. So she had accidentally induced vertigo. So she was at a point where she had fallen and hurt herself to the extent where she couldn't sit up or she couldn't walk. So she was only staying up or out of bed for a few hours every day. And she was very religious, and massage, not an option. So working with her was basically a process of trigger point and emotional embodiment work. And it took about 3 months for her to be walking around the block, going on dates with her husband. The whole arc of this was much more intense because she was dedicated. She was very resistant, but very dedicated, and really like took everything to heart and really went for it, and was able to completely change her path and her direction. I'm being very modest about this. I've had the weird realization that I have found myself in the business of miracles. I see it as an everyday miracle, but the people that I've been working with have done things that, even through my clinical practice and my clinical history, are doing things that I've never seen before, since introducing the full spectrum of what I actually do. Like, I had a client who had scoliosis and cleared his scoliosis in 6 weeks.
Wow.
The woman that I'm talking about literally couldn't walk and couldn't stay awake. And 3 months later was going for walks around the block, going for long drives, and having dates with her husband. I had a girl who was convinced that she couldn't get pregnant, and within a couple of weeks conceived, just by shutting down kind of her hypervigilance patterns that was keeping her in a stressed out state. And I keep seeing and working with people. I keep seeing people completely defy the odds by having faith and putting themselves into a position where they can actually experience something that is incredible.
From our conversations together, and it's been no less ironic in the fact that certain type of people are drawn to me as well. People with, we'll call it, very religious backgrounds.
Yeah.
Very, what I'm going to call it, strong, rigid upbringings in many ways. A lot of like right and wrong, and perhaps dogmatic and that. It's got to be interesting providing value and love to that. But I think there's something also very deeply beautiful around that, in that, in my experience, I've seen a lot of people walk away from, we'll call it, a spiritual sense of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I've become open about my process and journey back to what I will call my relationship with God and spiritual whatever, there's a wholeness to this whole thing, and there's a depth and there's a warmth that I'm surprised, and I'd be curious to hear your take on more or less like how it changes somebody's, I mean, how does it affect you? Like for me, it's something really deeply gratifying where I had a very more than arm's distance relationship with that for myself. And then welcoming that back into my own life, I found my own ability to support and love others, and host space and make people feel safer. I'm not making them anything. Endeavor to hold that space has been really beautiful. It's really gratifying to me to feel supportive in that relationship.
Oh, that's a deep subject. Just in the relationship of the work that I do, and the difference between a life where you're stuck in depression and a life where you're not, regardless of where we put God into the equation. You can have a relationship with fear, or you can have a relationship with the potential of the unknown. God, source, universe, anything that you want to call that unifying energy, or if you're pagan, you worship a whole bunch of gods. That is this side of things, where there is a relationship with the potential of the unknown. That's actually the only place where growth and change actually happens. When we have a relationship with fear, we have pain, we have resilience, which is good, but resilience, like, how long do you want to be resilient? I don't. I want to be abundant. I want to get to a state where I don't have to constantly suffer. This is also part of that addictive cycle, right? I would, losing my faith in my community at a young age. I was raised Mormon. So I was raised very, very devout. Mormons go to church all the time. We're constantly there. We're constantly with family, very, very tight communities. Things that I look back on now with my value set, I'm like, oh yeah, I really do kind of like the community and all of these different things. I may have not, like, I personally don't see myself as Mormon. I didn't fit in at a very young age. There were a lot of questions that came up around being a woman that just weren't met well. But losing my community and losing my faith was by far the longest struggle in transit that I think that I actually went through. I would much rather have that relationship with the unknown and the potential of the unknown and what can actually happen in life than live my life in a state where I'm constantly regressing through fear. And God in the equation, God out of the equation. Those are the two choices and the two places that you can be. And you can learn from here and move in this direction. It is possible. You can be here and find yourself over here. There is a balance, there's a contrast, there's color. Just because you're going through something bad currently in your life doesn't mean you're always going to be there. It is a transit. It's the same thing when you're over here and you don't practice your gratitude and celebrate the wins and the joys, all of a sudden you forget that you're here and you find yourself here. Um,
I
yeah,
really love the way you said that.
yeah. It
Yeah.
was a long road for me. I love all religions, but I also love not necessarily being in the religious community practice. But I also really miss that and kind of want that. And I live in a very Jewish neighborhood and I love my neighbors. They're really interesting.
Well, there is beauty. There is beauty in community, and I think people don't understand that it can be wielded in two different ways. I
Yeah.
think it's as much as people don't know, it can also be a very fragile beast as well. And it
Yep.
just because some of the practices work for somebody doesn't mean work for everybody. And it's when you brought
Yeah.
up curiosity and desiring to understand, I
Yeah.
think that if we can always keep that at the forefront, that there can be a harmony within that. And I appreciate you sharing your story, and that timelines happen to line up very similar to you and I. And we'll talk a little more afterwards, but the people that I've tended to work with, and sounds like very similar to you,
Mhm.
no longer it being this side or this side, but finding a way for it to come back to how do I have a happy relationship with both, and how can I would really call it the masculine and feminine energies learn how to work together collaboratively, as opposed to just fighting and getting nowhere, just being stuck in this combative relationship. Call it in pain and trapped emotion in the shoulders and the hips and the back, and then whatever. I love what you said there, and I'm happy that somebody's out there who's able to host that conversation, because it is not easy. So,
Yeah.
AzLynn, if somebody's listening right now, they're like, "Yo, I want some emotional architecture. I'm digging what she's putting down. I want to pick some of that up." How does somebody best connect with you?
You can go directly to my website, emotionalarchitecture.us, not .com, .us. You will find me there. You can submit through the contact form and actually set up a free call. 15 minutes to an hour. Sometimes I just enjoy myself and I will spend at least an hour with people. I always try to make sure that I have an opportunity to give something that someone can use, because sometimes people will take what I say and they run with it and they absolutely start transforming their lives and they're like, this was awesome, don't really need you.
That's cool.
And that's amazing. Like I'm happy. I just had a conversation with a girl at the park that came back, saw me the next week and was like, you would not believe, I don't know if this is what you meant, but I took this thing that you said and I turned it into this and I did all this stuff with this and I'm doing great.
That's
Like,
awesome.
good. So I always try to make sure that I can give something to the people that I'm speaking to, regardless. Just to make sure that, like, if we are meant to work together, that we both are a match for each other, right? Because we can't enter into this kind of state while butting heads. So yeah, it's not really an interview. You call yours a first date, which I kind of like that like concept's pretty good. But yeah, you can find me there. I'm really not sure. I'm on Instagram, but I'm not working it quite yet. I will be. It may be energy in motion. Like I'm not really
Or just go with emotional architecture. It sounds pretty good to me.
emotionalarchitecture.us.
I'll tag all the things. Don't you worry. Everybody's listening. It'll be in the show notes, so don't you worry.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. Please. Like I want to have if you're curious about working with me, I want to have a conversation with you.
That's
Because at
awesome.
the very least, I'll give you something that you can use to work through whatever you're dealing with. And if you like the help and you want to move forward, then there are steps beyond that. So, yeah.
I love it. Like I
Yeah.
said, that's going to be available. AzLynn, my
Yep.
dear, this is one of many beautiful conversations we've had, and I'm looking forward to many more. But before we sign off, at least from the episode,
Yep.
any parting words of wisdom that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, man. These are the kinds of things that just make my brain go blank.
What's something you want to make them feel?
Oh, whatever it is that you're going through, where you're at right now is not where you're going to stay. The things that you feel on a daily basis can absolutely change massively in a matter of minutes when you're ready. You know?
That sounds like a message of hope to me. I love that. I love it a lot.
I made it.
AzLynn, thank you for being just an amazing person. Thank you for walking into my life. However many months, I don't remember how we connected in the first place anymore. Actually, yes, I do.
Oh, yeah.
Who do I need to give a shout out? Oh my God.
TikTok.
Oh my God. I literally, when I have names on the tip of my tongue and I want to put my head through the wall. Whatever.
I only remember his moniker.
It's all good. Thank you for being awesome. Looking forward to many more. Remember, everybody, go check out the show notes for AzLynn's contact.
Yeah.
Another great episode in the books. Thank you, everybody, for listening. And until next time, I remind you to love everybody.